is it. Okay. All right. This is Lights Out. I am Faisal Khan, and this is podcast 36 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast. And it's been a while since we've done a podcast, and we're trying to get going again in amazing fashion by streaming these podcasts live via StreamYard. So massive shout out to StreamYard. It's the first time for Lights Out we're live streaming one of our podcasts, and how better way to start it than have one of the old faces return. Ron Mohsin Gulshare, welcome back, mate. And by judging what you've got over your right shoulder, it's a newborn baby, so congratulations. Your life has changed massively lately, hasn't it?
It has. This is a future world champ in the making here, so I just thought I'd get us started young.
Well, if Eddie Hearn's watching, I'm more than happy to send you over Mohsin Gulshare's phone number so you can discuss contracts and getting her into next year's fight camp. But no, honestly, Ron, congratulations on the little one, man. Well done to you, bro. And if you ever need a babysitter, don't plan on calling me anytime soon because I can barely look after myself. But it's been a while since we've done a podcast, so we'll get up and running. Before we get started, just want to say a massive shout out to all the people that are taking the time out to watch this now or perhaps later on. And of course, if you want to know more about Lights Out, please check out the links which are below in the description and below on the screen. Make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms. And if you haven't, please make sure you subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. As I said, it's been a while, so let's get cracking. You know, we've obviously been meeting up as of late because we're slowly getting back to some sort of normality. We're getting out of lockdown. We were talking a lot of boxing last night, and we said across the table, listen, it's time we started getting going with the podcast again. And it's all been happening within the last 6 weeks in boxing, but obviously it's not been happening for the right reasons. We'll get to the nitty-gritty of it in a second, but let's just start off with what I like to do. One of the most challenging things about these podcasts is the quick fire question. And today's quick fire question is, who had the best ring entrance in boxing? Ron, floor's all yours, my man. If you could pick a ring entrance that you could relive, whether it's 5 years ago or a year ago or 15 years ago, which one would it be?
Prince Nazim Hamid coming on a flying carpet. That comes to mind. And I can't remember. I mean, Prince Naz, you know, he had quite a few of these, fancy entrances. I remember, I think it was against Robinson, I think it was, or was it Kevin Kelly, who was getting infuriated in the ring, waiting for Naz to get into the ring. And it was all mind games, wasn't it, at the end of the day? But if anyone knew how to make an entrance, it was Prince Naz. I think he had, which rapper that he had? You know, he was the first one to have, artists performing on his entrance. And, we see the modern day boxers now kind of following suit, all fighters coming in with celebrities. Like we saw Mayweather, he's had some really interesting entrances as well. Him coming in with Justin Bieber, carrying his titles. But yeah, if anyone I could pick, it definitely Prince.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, obviously growing up, you can never forget those infamous ring entrances by Naz. Of course, the one against Kevin Kelly. I mean, I definitely remember just looking at Kevin Kelly's face thinking, wow, this is beyond the joke. And then he comes out to the Men in Black song and starts dancing around. And, he definitely knew how to make an entrance. One of the entrances I think that I really enjoyed thoroughly the most had to be Tyson Fury's second ring entrance against Deontay Wilder, when he come into that song called Crazy, and he come in, coming on that throne, he just smashed it. I've always enjoyed his ring entrances. I go back to obviously his comeback fight that me and you went to watch in Manchester, the absolute classic against Sefer Seferi. And he come into at least 4 or 5 tunes, but obviously the last one being the Return of the Mac, which is what he labeled his comeback fight as, Return of the Mac, because that obviously was the first time he'd returned in nearly 3 years. So, never forget, obviously that entrance. I enjoyed Billy Joe Saunders' entrance against Canelo Alvarez. I thought the theme song, Spartan Soldiers, was a good one. Canelo Alvarez seems to just go on another level when he enters the ring with all these Mexican dancers.
I mean, if you wanted to go something a bit more dark and a bit more serious, I remember Mike Tyson, coming in and, just that serious face on, ready for war. We the ones that entrances that we've talked about are quite flamboyant and flash and exciting, but then you've got the I'm ready for war here.
I think Tyson had 56 fights, right? And I believe 50 of those opponents were completely shitting themselves when he was making his appearance to the ring. The other 6 were definitely bang on it. But I know for a fact if I was one of Tyson's opponent, that would be probably the most, daunting times watching Mike Tyson make his ring entrance, especially with the towel over his head. But yeah, we've had some great classic ring entrances.
One last one I want to throw in though, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Ahmed.
Classic ring entrance.
Oh god, we've seen that on YouTube now. How that's been edited, and Uzi Ahmed claims that the entrance was and the knockout that he suffered, a horrific knockout, were not the same fight. But
I think we know better. But yeah, classic ring entrance. Definitely have to put it up there. Apollo Creed, Rocky IV against Ivan Drago. One that you definitely can't miss. But listen, let's move on. That's enough of ring entrances. Otherwise, we'll be here all night because the news broke to us yesterday. Errol Spence Jr. versus Manny Pacquiao is off. Now, Ron, I know you're probably going to think, oh, yeah, he's just saying it because it's now off. But the fight, I think, got announced. The cancellation of the fight got announced, I believe, around about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the afternoon UK time. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, I was obviously watching some old highlights of Errol Spence. And I thought to myself, it wouldn't surprise me if we got like a cancellation or one of them pulled out, weeks before the fight. And then what happened 3-4 hours later, bang. Errol Spence obviously pulls out due to a injury on his left eye. It's a torn retina. According to Spence, he met with 3 doctors, and they all told him the exact same thing. Shortly after that announcement was made, another announcement was made. The PBC announced that Manny Pacquiao will now fight Yordenis Ugas for the WBA title. So, do you know what, Rod? I don't want to go into the depths of it. I don't want to talk about Ugas too much. I don't want to talk about the switch of opponent. I just want to say, I'm going to be quite frankly honest with you. This for me has been the most disappointing year of boxing. We started off so brightly with the Luke Campbell-Ryan Garcia fight. And I remember we watched that fight together and we said, wow, we could be in for a special year of boxing. And then for about 6 weeks, you had the talk of, the next generation after Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, Durand. We started comparing the likes of Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney, Tank, and Ryan Garcia. And we thought if we can get at least 2 or 3 of those fights made in this year, we'll get a great year for boxing. One of our first podcasts this year was based on what big fights we're going to get this year. And then we had months of the Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua back and forth saga. That fight didn't happen. It's been a bad year for boxing because we've lost out on so many fights. Fury versus Wilder 3 has been postponed. And listen, Tyson Fury, my heart goes out to him. I hope his wife and the newborn baby can pull through what they're going through right now. But it looks as if that fight could also get postponed. And obviously that's not something too much you're going to dwell on because it's a family matter. But this has been a bad year for boxing, man. And it's just gotten worse because I truly believed that Errol Spence versus Manny Pacquiao would have been one of the fights of the year had we got to see it.
Totally agree with you. It's a massive shame. And it was a fight that I was actually really looking forward to see if does Manny Pacquiao have that, that special thing about him, one more time, against an up and coming, pound for pound, in Errol Spence. Yeah, agree with your sentiments there. It's been a really shit year in terms of fights being called off, and and I like that you made that comparison between the UFC and boxing.
On Facebook yesterday, yeah.
Yeah, your Facebook status, and you summed it up there. That you listed all the UFC title fights and the boxing ones, and it just there's no comparison there. And it's simple. There's none of these 4 governing bodies. There's only one governing body in UFC. Well, there's Bellator, but the UFC is the main one. And everyone fights everyone. but in boxing, it seems to be kind of depends on which broadcaster you're with, which which governing body you're fighting for, where you are in the rankings. It's too much drama, too much politics. It's just, you want to see the fight, best fight the best. You mentioned about the lightweight division. How exciting is that? But they seem to be avoiding each other. We saw towards the end of last year, we saw Teofimo Lopez beat Lomachenko. 2021, where's Teofimo Lopez?
Exactly.
And what we're hearing that he's gone over to Triller. Right there. Now that's been delayed. And he's a young man. We would love to have seen him in the ring and to see, was that a fluke or is he going to continue on that legacy? He's beaten a pound for pound in Lomachenko, top 3 in my opinion, regardless of how he beat him, whether injury or not injury. But it's a win on his record against Lomachenko. Yeah, this has been a tough year, and this. The Tyson Fury and Wilder, will it happen? Will it not happen? And then it kind then this AJ, it was kind of like we were being teased a little bit, and it just kept on. It got a little bit boring, and I just lost a bit of love for boxing in that respect.
It is a bad time for the sport, and I put that status up yesterday because I truly do believe right now UFC is the #1 sport. And it hurts me to say that. Don't get me wrong, I love both sports, but obviously my #1 passion will always be boxing. But I just think UFC right now is just you don't get those tussles, you don't get those problems that the UFC, that boxing have right now in the UFC. You got one guy who's known as Dana White, just puts an offer on the table, and then bang, it's done. I mean, you've seen Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier fight twice already this year. Conor McGregor is arguably one of the biggest stars in the UFC. Our biggest stars, Joshua, Fury, Crawford, Spence, these fighters are yet to fight this year. And obviously some of them have reasons and some of them have valid reasons and some of them probably don't have valid reasons. But it's worrying that another big fight has gone down the pan. I know we've obviously seen Povetkin versus White 2. We saw Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders. We even got to see Joe Joy step up against Carlos Takam. We've seen Fight Camp 2 weeks of that, but it's been a disappointing year for boxing. I personally think Joshua versus Usyk will be the biggest fight of the year. Then after that, Canelo versus Billy Joe Saunders. We don't know whether Canelo will fight again this year. I'm hoping he does. But it's just been a bad year. We obviously will have to talk about the change of opponent now. Yordenis Ugas. Look, win, lose, or draw, I don't want Yordenis Ugas to be Manny Pacquiao's last fight. I still believe he's got enough to offer, and I still believe that the way to bow out for me for Manny Pacquiao is to fight Crawford or Spence. These are the 2 fights that you want to see, a guy who's created the legacy that he has sign out in the way that we all want to see him sign out. We don't want to see him lose to Yordenis Ugas, or we don't want to see him outbox Yordenis Ugas. No disrespect to Ugas, he's a good fighter, but I do think Pacquiao's in another level. We really don't want Pacquiao's last fight to be against Ugas. So, fingers crossed he could get past Ugas, and then at some point, perhaps early 2022, we might get to see the Pacquiao Spence fight. One question I've got to ask, Rondo. I mean, let's say we possibly would have delayed this for 6 weeks. Why was there no approach made from Top Rank, Bob Arum and Terence Crawford to get the Spence fight?
That's a very good question. I mean, if they was able to delay it, but I guess it's all about down to logistics, isn't it? Finding a venue at in 6 weeks' time. It's a big fighter. It's a big fight. It's a sellout. It's going to be a pay-per-view event. I was hearing of they were going to charge people $74 for that. Yeah, that's a lot of money, and it's a shame. It's just a massive shame. But touching on that, you said about all these fights falling through. That's kind of given rise to these YouTube boxers coming through now. This is where people are losing interest in. All right, fine. If the best boxers are not going to fight each other, oh, I'd rather watch a Jake Paul or a what's his name? All these other YouTube stars step into the ring, and that's been entertaining. And fair play to them. They've put their money where their mouth is. So Trilla's on the rise at the moment as another kind of event. Yeah. But
listen, it's a massive shame, man. The worst news possible. You said it yourself yesterday. You was looking forward to the fight. I was looking forward to the fight as well. It was going to be one of those late nighters, but it would have been worth it. But what can you do? It's just boxing. Anyway, we'll move on now because obviously some positive news. Last Saturday night, Kid Galahad become the new world featherweight champion after stopping Jazza Dickens in round 11. Great night of boxing, fight camp week 2. And I'm really happy for the kid. I thought he got very hard done by against Josh Warrington with the decision a couple of years ago when he went to Sheffield, when he went to Leeds to fight Warrington. I thought he won the fight overall, but he didn't get the decision. And then I thought, what with him becoming 30 odd, is he really going to get another opportunity at that level? And he did get another opportunity, and he rose to the occasion. I thought his performance was brilliant. I thought he completely, manhandled Jazza Dickens. And no disrespect to Jazza Dickens, but there was a massive gulf in class in that fight. He wins his first world title. It's another world champion produced by the Ingalls gym. And I remember, when you watch the kid's interviews, previous interviews from the past, he's always said, look, when I was a young kid, I remember I was outside the mosque in Sheffield after Friday prayers, and I went up to Naz and I said to him, look, I want to become a world champion. What do I have to do? Naz's answer strictly was go down the Ingalls gym and do exactly what they tell you to do. Follow every instruction and you'll become a world champion. Just work hard at it. And look what's happened now. He's a world champion. He's ranked number 2 in the world in the featherweight division. There's so many options for the kid. But obviously, winning the world title, he now goes from the hunted to the hunted. What do you think is the next step for Kid Galahad?
I mean, there's 2 routes that you can take. There's either the British route, in Britain and Northern Ireland. I'd say there's 3 other fighters. Josh Warrington being one. You got Michael Conlon, who I like the look of, who's undefeated, being another. And then we've got the recent regular champion in Lee Wood, who beat Shu Kan, in that great fight. It was against the bookies. He was the underdog in that, and he really beat a top operator there. So that's one way he could go, and that's going to sell out any stadium. I mean, not a Wembley Stadium or anything like that, but it will most definitely sell out an Elland Road or where's he from? Kid Galahad. He's from Yorkshire,
Sheffield.
Isn't he?
Yeah,
Sheffield. Yeah. So you could do it. You can get the Sheffield Stadium, but then you can go down Leo Santa Cruz. If you wanted to make some money, go over to the States and fight there. So you put it perfectly, from the hunter to the hunted now.
Yes,
and he's in a good position. And I recently heard a recent interview where he was kind of poking fun at that his world title doesn't have a regular in front of it. And I think Davison, wasn't very impressed with that. But he give credit to Lee Wood. That was a phenomenal performance there. Nobody gave him a chance. Ben Davison speaks really highly of him. He's a really hard puncher. But Kid Galahad, I mean, that performance against Jazza Dickens, and he's done, in his only loss against Josh Warrington, he didn't, let himself down there. He gave a really good account of himself, and I totally agree with you. That decision could have gone either way.
Yeah, listen, it's exciting times in that featherweight division. Michael Conlon's another fighter, great amateur background. He won the night before against TJ Daney. The featherweight division's got some good fights to be made. Me personally, I'd like to see the Lee Wood fight. And I look, I don't want to sound, like I'm a hater or something, but if Josh Warrington was to win the rematch against Maurizio Lara, I don't think it makes sense for him to jump back straight into a world title fight. I think if anything, what I'd like to see is like a sort of a robin round between the 4 of them. So you get Galahad fighting Lee Wood, and then obviously if fingers crossed, if Warrington can get the victory over Mauricio Lara in that rematch, if that's the biggest fight of his career, loses that fight, where does he possibly go from there? So if he does get the victory against Mauricio Lara, which I expect him to do, home advantage, being in front of that, that hostile Leeds atmosphere, I'd like to see him fight Michael Condon, and the winner of those two fights, you might potentially, I don't know, have maybe a unification. You could. It makes more sense. I don't see the need for Warrington the need for a Galahad to fight a Navarrete or a Leo Santa Cruz right now. But as I mentioned before earlier on in the podcast, boxing suffered this year. It suffered with these big fights not happening. So let's keep it in house. Those four, have a Robin round, and if that's two fights we could potentially see, and whoever comes out on top after those two or three fights, then they could look to the likes of a Navarrete or a Leo Santa Cruz. Me personally, that's what I'd like to see happen.
Yeah, so either way, it's good. It's a good featherweight division is looking bright.
Exactly. But listen, massive shout out to Kid Galahad the other night, and a great show as well. You had a good win for Alan Babic, stopping. I believe Matt Webster? Amazing chin that guy had. But Alan Babic, he is the savage, and then obviously. Yes, congratulations are in order. If he needs any marriage advice, just ask us to. We're both happily married men. And then of course Nick Webb, obviously getting stopped by Fabio Wardley. A very good win for Fabio Wardley. You also had Ebony Bridges get back to winning ways, beating Bet Connolly. There were some good fights the other night. So we look forward to.
Okay, so just on what do you see? What's the next fight for Fabio Wardley?
I think the Nathan Gorman fight makes perfect sense. I believe Joe Joyce will vacate the British title. I'm not too sure what's going on with the European, but Joe Joyce will definitely vacate the British title, and I do think that the fight between Fabio Wardley and Nathan Gorman makes tremendous sense. What you've got here is you've got two fighters who are sort of in the same path, on the same sort of route in their careers. They've had the same amount of fights. You've got Fabio Wardley beating opponents, knocking opponents out left, right, and centre. And you've got Nathan Gorman, who's come back after a loss of Daniel Dubois, who put in a decent performance himself. So I think maybe Gorman might fancy a warm-up fight because he's been out the ring for a couple of months. And I think that's definitely a fight that we could see perhaps maybe at the end of the year. I think Nathan Gorman technically is better than Fabio Wardley. I believe Fabio Wardley is a heavier hitter, but I do think Nathan Gorman's technically the better fighter. It's a 50-50 fight, don't get me wrong, but it's just, again, we think it's the perfect fight to be made. There's lots of fights you can make in that heavyweight division right now. So it is a fight I'd like to see, but listen, you never know in this game of boxing. We'll move on now because obviously news broke to us last Saturday that a big fight was announced for October the 9th. It's a Liverpool derby. Liam Smith will take on Anthony Fowler in the 154-pound super welterweight division. The press conference took place yesterday, and something unexpected happened. Liam Smith snubbed Anthony Fowler when Anthony Fowler offered him a handshake. Now, I didn't expect that to happen. Yes, worse things have happened in the past. We've seen Chisora throw tables at Dillian White. We've seen Chisora kiss one of the Klitschkos. We've seen Mayorga slap, Shane Mosley's girlfriend's backside at the time. Things have happened in press conferences, but I didn't expect that to happen. But one thing I really, really like about this fight is I've not seen Liam Smith fired up for a fight like this. I think this fight means more to him than any other fight. And yes, he's had big fights before. Okay, so he got robbed in Russia against Karabov. There was the fight against the two fights against Liam Williams, and of course the Canelo fight. But this fight for me means more to him than any other fight, strictly because it's a Liverpool derby. But Ron, what was your thoughts on the actual fight being announced? Was it a fight that you saw coming?
I mean, it is eventual, yeah. I mean, both fighters. Talking about Liam Williams, I mean, he's only lost against a top level opposition. Unfortunate with his last fight, Canelo. That's a foregone conclusion with that. But Anthony Fowler, only one defeat on his record. He's looked good since then. I think he lost as a split decision, wasn't it?
Against Fitzgerald, Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah, Scott Fitzgerald. So, no, I think it's a good matchup. There's nothing on the line, but it could make or break either of their careers. So I'm really interested to see who comes out on top there. I'm putting my money on Anthony Fowler. I think this is his moment to shine. What do you make of it? What do you think?
I think it's a cracking fight. I think it's the fight that both fighters need in their career right now. I think Liam Smith needs to win this fight more than any. But obviously, Anthony Fowler's 30 years old now. He's not really at that age.
3 and 30, yeah, both of them.
He's not at that. He's not at that gap. He's not at that place in his career where he's like the next up and coming thing. Now is you're going to see within the next 12 to 18 months whether this guy is ready for that world elite level. And Liam Smith is a world elite fighter. As I mentioned, it's a Liverpool derby one, and it's a fight that Liam Smith needs to win more, because if he loses this fight, there's no way back for him. In terms of the snub, what did you make of him refusing to shake Anthony Fowler's hand? Obviously, you've got a different opinion on it, so let's hear it.
Well, yeah, I just found that really interesting. I didn't see that coming. There's been no needle, like you see on social media between the two fighters. It just came out of nowhere. Anthony Fowler was more than happy to play his hand out, and he didn't want to know, kind of thing. He was just like, he had his fight game on. So that could just show us that this is all or nothing. This is it. His career's on the line here now. If he's to really challenge for a world title or any sort of honours, Anthony Fowler's just like, right, I win this fight. I've got some really big fights that could be made for me. I could be in for title fights here. So this is a make or break. So you can see, where people's heads are at.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting fight, and I think obviously, as I mentioned, if Liam Smith loses this fight, there's no way back for him. And you got to look at the family he comes from. All four are boxers, and all four have done, have had wonderful achievements in their career. And I've always liked the Smith brothers, and I've always liked Liam Smith as well. Having said that, Anthony Fowler, as you mentioned, has come on quite good since he obviously lost to Scott Fitzgerald in what was a cracking fight. But this is, Liam Smith is not Scott Fitzgerald. Liam Smith, is a total different breed, and I do believe
it's the right sort of fight for him to have at this point in his career.
But one thing I will say is that one thing I really like about this fight is you've got Shane McGuigan in one corner, and you've got Gallagher in the other corner. The two very good trainers.
Coaches, yeah.
And you remember what they were both like when Carl Frampton fought Scott Quigg. There was a real rivalry there. So it's going to be interesting to see, especially with those two trainers in each other's corners. But listen, Fowler stepped up once and he lost. Do you think that could play a part in this fight? Because when the question was asked of Anthony Fowler stepping up to maybe not an elite level, but the next level upwards, he kind of like, when you look back at that fight against Fitzgerald, I actually had him up by one round, but that knockdown just completely changed the landscape of that fight. Do you think now is the right time for him to be taking a fight against a Liam Smith, or do you think it made more sense for him to get avenge that defeat against a Scott Fitzgerald, or fight another fighter like a Ted Cheeseman in that division?
Well, if he's not going to take it now, then when is he going to take it? He's 30 years of age. He's in his prime. It's now or never, really. This business moves really quickly. So, that fight was quite a long time ago. What year was that? That was a good 4 or 5.
2019. The fight was against Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah. So, it was quite a few years ago, and he's had several fights in between then. He's had some good victories since then. So Liam Smith, perfect opportunity for Anthony Fowler to do his thing and put his name on the mark and get himself up the rankings. So, yeah, excellent matchmaking.
Well, listen, let me know if you fancy a weekend trip to Liverpool. Go down and get some tickets and watch it, and show you a proper football ground as well, which is just around the corner.
What's that, Everton one, yeah?
No, that's not a football ground. Anyway, listen, let's move on now. Can we talk about Fight Camp Week 3, the final Fight Camp as well? It's been an amazing 2 weeks. Shout out to Eddie Hearn, Matchroom and DAZN for putting on 2 brilliant weeks of boxing. But obviously, this is the Fight Camp finale for this year, and it is Josh Buatsi versus Ricards Bolotniks. You got some good fights on that night as well. You got Michael Mickinson returning as well. Zelfa Barrett as well. But obviously, the main event is going to be the main talking point. Josh Buatsi, can't fault him. The guy has been phenomenal throughout his career, and he is coming up against a good, credible opponent. Josh Buatsi, Ron, one win away from challenging for world honours, or do you think this still tests domestic-wise for him that makes sense to take if he does come out on top on Saturday night?
I mean, what's stopping him? I mean, he's kind of bypassed the British scene, hasn't he? I mean, there's a lot of talk him being put in with Anthony Yarde, but Anthony Yarde's career's kind of stalled since his defeat to Kovalev, and then to who am I thinking of? Lyndon Arthur, absolutely. So I like the look of Buatsi. Whenever I've seen him fight, he's looked really good. And I know he's from what I've seen on social media, he's very close to AJ, and he kind of listens to AJ's advice as well. He's got that professionalism about him. He does what he needs to do. His last fight, he looked really good, and it was a good, a knockout win. Absolutely, I'd love to see him one or two more fights, get him in. I think that's what Eddie Hearn's looking at. Maybe something by the end of this year, maybe. What is it? Where we're now in August, so see how he gets on this fight. Absolutely.
Listen, I agree with what you're saying there. I mean, obviously, a good performance on Saturday night maybe does put him up against, maybe a Bivol or a Beterbiev, a Badu Jack. There are some good fighters in this light heavyweight division, but well, maybe.
Well, I mean, that's another name I'm hearing.
I just want to touch on something, right? We talk, people talk about the light heavyweight division, and they say it's a killer of a division, right? Craig Richards put up a very good performance a couple of months ago against Dimitri Bivol.
Yeah,
I wasn't impressed with Dimitri Bivol. Maybe it was an off night. Maybe Richards' style didn't confuse Bivol a lot. Don't get me wrong, got the decision and everything, but I was expecting a lot more. So yeah, I would like to see Josh Buatsi challenge for a world title, but I also think the fights with the likes of Lyndon Arthur, Anthony Yarde, Callum Johnson, even Craig Richards, even why not? But Ron
bypassed that, hasn't he? There's not been much. There was early on in his career a lot of talk about him versus Anthony Yarde, but now that's not. I'm not hearing that much loud noises about that. Now we're seeing he's going to the world level. You've just read out a string of good British, fighters in that division. So I think he's the best of the British bunch. So he's on the cusp of kind of that world elite level. So let's see what happens on Saturday night.
You say he's the best of the British bunch, but the British champion is Lyndon Arthur right now. Okay, so I mean, for crying out loud, look, Frank Warren said it, at the back end of last year. There's so many great, domestic fights to be made, but the hurdle in front of us is that most of the domestic fighters are separated to two platforms, with our platform and Matchroom. You want to talk about great domestic fights, Zelfa Barrett, Archie Sharp, brilliant fight to be made at super featherweight. But what's the reason it can't be made? One's with Matchroom, one's with BT Sports.
It's sad.
Whether you like it or not, I still think one of the biggest obstacles between Fury and Joshua was one was with Top Rank, BT Sport, one was with Matchroom. This is a sad thing, and it's not. Listen, obviously, as the fans are going to suffer as well, but let's remember one thing: these fighters are going to suffer. Back in the day, look behind me. Eubank and Ben, they fought twice. Back in the day, you got these great British domestic fights. We've seen these fights happen. These fighters, they need to be looking at past examples and past experiences and thinking, you know what? We owe it to British boxing fans to fight the fighters in and around us before we move on to world level. But obviously, money talks, and these fighters have their own mind, and they've got their own promoters and managers, and unfortunately, they'll go where the money is. But I personally think, for me, I still would love to see Buatsi fight someone like a Callum Johnson or a Lyndon Arthur or an Anthony Yarde, even Callum Smith. Callum Smith's coming off that loss against Canelo. He's moving up to light heavyweight now. What better way to start off your light heavyweight adventure? You did two Matchroom fighters. That could sell out the O2. that could sell out the Manchester Arena. That's a brilliant fight.
I think for Eddie Hearn, that's a bit of a lose-lose situation because he's got, it's Callum Smith. He's a world title holder, a super middleweight. He doesn't want Callum Smith to be losing that first fight he has at light heavyweight against Buatsi, and Buatsi is his, up and coming world title challenger. He doesn't want him to do that fight. So it would make more sense for them to both win titles, and then you go, here we go, boys, fight out for all the titles or two of the titles or whatever it is. So it makes it a bit more tastier. And he touched on back on the day where people like Eubank and Ben fought. They were the money fights. The other fights weren't that much. They weren't that much money they were getting. So, but the problem in boxing is too much money. Like you said, is they go wherever the money goes. There is money to be made on. You can go to Saudi and fight there. You can go to Showtime. You can go. There's so much money to be made elsewhere.
Well, listen, I mean, I think it's disappointing that we're not getting these British domestic clashes. But obviously, we're not boxing promoters. We don't run the game. But good test on Saturday night. I do think Josh Buatsi will win this fight within 4 to 6. I can see him, I think he'll have too much for Bolotniks on the night. Me personally, I would have I do think this is the time it should have been more of a step-up opponent. I believe Bolotniks has lost, 5 times? So, yeah, but listen, it is what it is. You can only make the best of a bad situation. Obviously, bear in mind, we're still in a pandemic as well. Maybe that's the reason why we're not getting these big fights being made. But I do see Josh Buatsi comfortably winning on Saturday night, and then who knows what happens. Another topic we talk about is we've got 2 big fights on Saturday night as well. Joshua Franco versus Andrew Moloney 3, and then John Rueil Casimero versus the legendary Guilermo Rigondeaux. Obviously, we talk about Franco Moloney 3. They fought twice. First time, Franco coming as the underdog. I still remember watching that fight last year when boxing restarted again. It was one of those top-ranked shows without fans. Brilliant fight. Franco got the decision over Andrew Moloney, put him down in the 12th round, become the new champion. They fight on the Kell Brook versus Terence Crawford undercard. The fight gets stopped. Accidental headbutt. So no contest fight, no decision was given in the end. Joshua Franco claims it was a headbutt. Andrew Moloney, till this day, I still remember his reaction going around saying, no, it's a disgrace. It wasn't a headbutt. It was a clean punch. And the fight got given as a no contest. Now, the third fight is going to be really interesting. I've been watching the build-up to this fight. Andrew Moloney's pumped. He knows for a fact that he's in the right frame of mind for this fight. And what I really like about this fight now is Joshua Franco's got a lot to answer for now in this fight. He went into that second fight. Everyone thought the same type of performance. And I do remember watching that second fight. And I thought Andrew Moloney was the better fight overall. I had him winning majority of the rounds. And then all of a sudden that freak incident happens and the fight gets stopped. And I do believe it wasn't a headbutt. It was a punch that caused the injury to the eye. And then the fight did get stopped. So, Ron, let me ask you this, right? You win the first fight as the underdog. You become a world champion. You put in a great performance. Then the second fight, a lot of people accuse you of taking the easier way out. A lot of people saying you got given a decision. You escaped with your belt that way. What sort of frame of mind do you think that puts Joshua Franco going into the third fight come Saturday night?
I think he's got a point to prove here that it wasn't a fluke. He wasn't, trying to take an easy way out. And there's a lot more interest this time in this third fight, because people were left a little bit unsatisfied after the premature ending of that fight under, certain circumstances. But, from, watching the first fight, it was a cracking affair. So, I'm looking forward to it. I hope it builds up to the hype that we've been, we're expecting here. Who's your money on? Who you think's?
I'm going for Andrew Moloney. I think what happened to him in the second fight has just pumped this guy up. Been watching some of his footage in training. This guy looks, he looks absolutely boosted for this fight. I actually think he'll wipe the floor with Joshua Franco this time. Don't get me wrong. I got a lot of time for Joshua Franco. He's a very good fighter. And he did what he had to do in the first fight. But the second fight, and again, I like to try and stay as partial as possible. I like to try and be as fair as I can. But I do believe he was given an escape route, and that's why he left the building with his title that night. And I just thought a lot of injustice was done that night. I thought Bob Arum as well has done tremendously well by getting this third fight to happen, because, Franco could have easily have vacated, or he could have thought, no, I'll just take an easier fight. Because Andrew Moloney is a good fighter. His first defeat was to Joshua Franco. So rightfully so, he was given the opportunity to win the belt back. And then obviously that incident happens, and then here we are for a third fight. Are we complaining? No, I think it's a very good fight. It's a shame he doesn't get the recognition it deserves on social media, because this is a very good fight. And I do believe Moloney wins this third fight, and I believe he wins it by a unanimous decision. Another good fight for the WBO World Bantamweight title, obviously, Rueil Casimero versus Guilermo Rigondeaux. Rigondeaux is one of those names that has been around for so long. Can Rigondeaux win another world title at the age of 40, Ron?
Why not? He is a class act. He's look. I mean, if Pacquiao's still doing it, both high-level operators, then I don't see why not. It just depends on if Father Time decides otherwise.
Yeah, listen, as I just mentioned about Franco Moloney, this fight, again, it's not getting the recognition it deserves. But obviously, look, I mean, unfortunately, the way it's being, branded out on social media via the promoters, maybe that's the reason why it's not getting the recognition it deserves. But I look at this fight, right, and I think that Casimero, people are saying this is his biggest test. I saw Casimero when he beat Charlie Edwards, and I saw him when he beat Zolano Tete. He's a very, very good fighter, is Rueil Casimero. And I do think, obviously, age, doesn't always play a big factor, but I think it plays a big factor come Saturday night. Casimero, he's a fast-paced fighter. He fights on the front foot. Rigondeaux's getting on a bit. Can he deal with that sort of fast-paced style from Casimero? That's the big question you want to ask. Tactically, it's a great fight, because obviously we mentioned that Casimero is a younger fighter, but Rigondeaux's a more experienced fighter, and he's going for another world title at the age of 40. But phenomenal fight. Really, really looking forward to it. And you know what? I do believe, obviously, we've got Fight Camp Week 3. We've got Franco Moloney, but I do think that this fight is the one that will sell. Move on now. Final topic. A successful Olympics for Team GB boxing. Do you know what, Ron? We have to pay tribute to not just obviously the boxing side of Team GB, but you've got to pay tribute to every member of Team Great Britain that participated in the Olympics, and of course all the other countries, all the other Olympians that took part in this year's Olympics, because benefit of the doubt. Last year the Olympics was postponed till this year, and unfortunately they've had to go all the way to Tokyo and done it behind closed doors. So it must have not been easy, an extra year of waiting, an extra year of preparation. But massive shout out to Team GB in a whole. But Team GB boxing, a phenomenal campaign. They won 6 medals in total: 2 gold, 2 silver, 2 bronze. Ron, how bright is the future now for British boxing?
Oh, it's really positive to see that. That was the most successful they've been in boxing.
One of the most successful, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. Love seeing the fight without the head guards. Best of 3 rounds. I love the scoring system. It's very clear after each round who's won that round. It's not left, very unclear like in actual boxing. So, but big shout out to Galahad. The Galahad, really, really enjoyed watching him. We've seen the Yafai brothers, being world champions. So, that's another one. I mean, they're probably doing their family really proud. Is it McCormack? I think I really enjoyed watching that.
Pat McCormack.
Yeah, that was good. He was a bit unlucky in the final against the Cuban. I mean, the Cubans are the Cubans. That is their bread and butter, isn't it? The boxing. But on the whole, I mean, Fraser Clark as well. He won bronze, so that's another addition. I mean, I see a lot of these fighters that I've mentioned all going pro now as well. So that's going to be interesting. That's going to be exciting. We'll see how they fare in the professional ranks. So, and the best of luck to them as well.
And then obviously some of the names you forgot to mention, obviously Karis Artingstall, Lauren Price, Benjamin Whittaker, all won medals at the Olympic Games. Phenomenal achievement, man, and a brilliant effort.
Really proud. They've done the country really proud.
As I mentioned, Ron, when you obviously watch the Olympics, for me, the Olympics that I always go back to is London 2012, obviously, because it was based in our country. Having that support there, spurring you on is what gets you over the finishing line. So for these guys to not only have had to wait an extra year, but to also go there, all the way to Tokyo as well, without any fans, without any family, says a lot about these guys, their character. So Team GB in a whole were phenomenal throughout the Olympics. I did watch majority of the boxing. I didn't watch much of the other sports. I watched a bit of the hockey as well. But I thought Team GB British boxing-wise, a brilliant Olympics. But what do you think the key is behind having a successful boxing team at the Olympics?
I mean, there's the funding has to be in place. You got Rob McCracken. I think he's, is he running it? Is he head of it? Or
head of it, yeah.
And we know what a phenomenal coach he is, and the work that he does with Anthony Joshua. That was a bit of I remember when the AJ and Fury fight was being made, and that was penciled in for August, and people saying, well, that is not going to be a problem for AJ. So I guess that fight being called off was a blessing in disguise, because you would want someone like who's highly qualified as someone like him to be there in your corner. But with him in place, GB boxing is in a good place. So and it's all about grassroots boxing as well. So that's funded and supported adequately. And long may it continue. Now we've got these up and coming youngsters. They've got these role models to aspire to. I mean, these the people who won their gold medals now, they're probably seeing the Joe Joyces. They're seeing the Anthony Joshuas winning their titles. And all these other boxers that won their gold medals and before them.
When you look at, obviously, as you just mentioned, the likes of Joe Joyce, Anthony Joshua, also taking into consideration fighters like Nicola Adams and Lawrence Okoli, Josh Buatsi also done amazing things at the Olympics as well. So I look at where those fighters are now. Joe Joyce is not far off a world title, neither is Josh Buatsi. And then you got Joshua and Lawrence Okoli that are current world champions. So if we, with these crop of fighters who've had a success at the Olympics, Caroline Dubois as well. Granted, she didn't win a medal.
That was the one that really
I don't think she had a disappointing tournament. She lost to one of the best fighters in her weight category. But again, she was a junior Olympic champion, wasn't she? Exactly. But you look at
20 years
the experience.
Of age.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The experience she's going to take from this. And obviously, she's got
she lost on as well.
Exactly. She gave a great account of herself. I think when you look at the success we've had with Team GB boxing, we've got every right to be excited for the next 3 to 5 years. But it's just a case of which one of them will want to turn pro, and it's just a case of who they're going to get managed by. Are they going to get managed in the right way? Are they going to be put in the right fights? And hopefully they don't become, I don't know, another Audley Harrison. Do you know what I mean? So listen, look, at the end of the day, take nothing away from Audley Harrison, but these guys have had a massive success in Tokyo. I still feel from that they couldn't have a fan base out there, but then you see the reception that they got when they returned to the airport the other day. Phenomenal. Galalia 5, really, really excited to see what he does in the pro games. Fraser Clark, he's been around the amateurs for a very long time. I'm excited to see how he gets on in the heavyweight division.
And, those two names that you've just mentioned, both of them are respectively 28 and 29. So It's not going to be, let's build them up slowly. It's going to be like Joy Joyce's career. They're going to be like, right, fast forward. Let's get you the bigger fights earlier on now, So expect good things from those, big things from them, and very quickly.
Yeah, 100%. Ron, that's all we've got time for today on this edition of the Lights Out Boxing podcast. But it's been really, really fun, especially doing it via this live stream. I'm having to learn with literally 6 hours notice how to get used to StreamYard, but it wasn't that bad. Ron, thank you very much for joining us, and once again, congratulations on baby number 2. Really appreciate you coming on as always. I look forward to giving you a nightmare on the pitch come Friday night. For those who haven't, if you haven't already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button, as you can see below on the screen and in the description. Our social media platforms are there. Give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Be sure to check out our latest posts. We're currently uploading all the latest boxing news via our Instagram and Facebook story, and retweeting on Twitter. We're trying to cover as much things as possible. So, Ron, thank you for your time, and for everybody that tuned in today, thank you very much for watching episode 36 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.